Welcome to the String Theory of the Unexplained. I'm your host, John Ventry. Our co-host is Fred Saluga. And on today's episode, we will be discussing the Montauk Project. Welcome to our show. Well, Fred, I want to talk about today the Montauk Project. We've never talked about that before. And what I've seen in a lot of these cases is they relate to other cases,
right.
you know. And I didn't really put the connection together that the Montauk Project came off of the Philadelphia experiment.
Right.
And there's even more that relates to the Montauk Project.
Well, quite a bit of stuff happened there.
Yeah.
Your MK Ultra was done there.
Yeah.
A lot of your weaponry. They say that in Alaska.
Oh, HARP?
HARP was actually thought of there. They actually had a Tesla lab there.
Tesla. Yeah, Tesla lab.
lab
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, but you know what I find interesting is that if you think of Roswell, you know, like what else came off of Roswell? You know, like we talked about there was like different crashes, that Aztec, I think, crash,
right.
and Linda Darnell and all that, you know. Like you had all this stuff come off of these storylines. You know, this one actually, there's like 4 or 5 different branches that come off of this. So let's get into it, talk about the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment. It's all based, I don't know if you ever saw this book, Fred, The Montauk Project by Preston Nichols. Yeah, you can thumb through it. I mean, I bought that book. There was something on Discovery Channel talking about the Montauk Project, and they were interviewing some of the people. And you know, it's like every channel now, they have a UFO or paranormal show, they do 5, 6 episodes, and they never see them again. They just get new people. So it gave me the idea, and I said, well, what's going on with this? He intertwines the Montauk story with Nazism, World War II. The only thing I don't like is that Preston Nichols, he makes this statement in the beginning of the book that says, whether you view this as real or science fiction. You know, that makes me very leery. If it's a true story, why would you say that? Because, you know, when I write my books, which are sci-fi, I actually wanted to write one like that was a diary that you found and say whether you believe this or not.
Well, see, that's what you want to say, because then they don't know what is real.
Yeah, well, apparently,
You could be, if you have something that's say, for example, UFO, and we say you can believe this is science fiction or that, I mean, it's taken away from the UFO, so you're not really believing it's a UFO. You know? Well,
you know, so what happens is he writes, and he says in the book that his verification is that this is 1992, he wrote this, he runs into this guy named Duncan Cameron, and that's after the thing ended in 83, but before his book. That's the source of his information. Duncan Cameron and his brother were on the Philadelphia experiment, right? And they went back in time, or forward in time to 1983. You know, and Duncan jumped off the ship. The brother stayed on the ship. So when it came back, there was only one brother. They don't know what happened to Duncan. He was 40 years ahead in the future. So when he makes his way out to Montauk, that's when he meets Preston Nichols, gives him this story, and that's where the story comes from, is now the verification for the story. And he jumped off the Eldridge, was the ship that was with the Philadelphia experiment, you know. And he verifies a lot of the technology that you mentioned, you know, Tesla technology, all of that comes from this guy, Duncan Cameron. So this takes place on Long Island. It's at Camp Hero base, which was an old World War II Air Force base. And they claim that these experiments went on there from 1970 to 1983. Okay? So, now, I lived on Long Island. I moved to Long Island in 1970, you know? So that was interesting, but this was about 80 miles east of where I was living, you know?
The guy that is in jail out there, where did he live out? Did he live somewhere?
Ford, John Ford.
Yeah, did he live around that area?
You know, he's not far. Actually, he would be halfway between me and Camp Hero was John Ford. He was maybe 30 miles or 40 miles closer to this area than I.
Maybe he's seen what he said he seen.
Well, I think he definitely did see something, and he got set up by the commissioners there because he was making waves, you know. So this is all a consequence of the Philadelphia experiment that went from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, and came back in 1943. Now, what the Philadelphia experiment was a Tesla cloaking device that we were trying to come up with a way to our ships not be seen by the German ships and the German submarines. So they were working on a way with Tesla to cloak the ship. Tesla pulls out of this because he didn't really want anything to do with the military. He just wanted to invent stuff, you know? So he pulls out. So, like I said, the ship vanishes, goes down to Norfolk, comes back to Virginia. A lot of the crew is missing. That guy jumped. Others are actually fused into the hull. Some went insane because it really did something to their minds as they went through a dimension. And the technology that's linked to this, the Montauk Project, also has time travel.
Right.
So it wasn't just cloaking and going to a different location, it was time travel. They went through like a portal or something.
Right.
So now the information from about the Philadelphia experiment, obviously the military knew about it, it was their project, and others, but Carlos Allende contacts the Navy and gives him this information, which is this book here, The Case for the UFO. Now my book is Case for the UFO, his is The Case for the UFO. So I definitely left the out. Right. And this is the Varro edition, which means it was printed by the Varro company. But it was the Navy that printed the book. So in this book it talks about extraterrestrials and all of that, plus the Philadelphia experiment. So that's the book that, you know, it ends up getting written by Morris Jessup, but the information comes from Carlos Allende, right? Through the Navy.
Carlos Allende, isn't that the one that Gorman talked to?
Yeah, I think so. He was here in New Kensington. He's from New Kensington, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So in that book, there's all information about aliens, is what it is. So this guy Morris Jessup, like a lot of these guys, if you remember when we talked about Frank Scully and Dr. G and all, Dr. G invented a way of tracking submarines. Well, Morris Jessup is an astronomer. He's the founder of the YMCA's, and he was an original ancient alien archaeologist. He visited all of the ancient sites in the 40s and 50s, and his books talk about that. Prior to Eric Van Daniken, he went to Baalbek, Cusco, the pyramids. He went to all of these places, which is why the Navy involved him and said, look, here are these letters. We want you to figure this out. Is this real? Is it not real? The stuff from Allende, right? So they get this guy, a prominent person. They give it to him. The Navy prints this stuff up from Allende. The Philadelphia experiment is described in there too. They give it to Jessup to do the investigation in 1956. 1959, Jessup commits suicide.
So they will say,
and his note said...
Did he commit suicide?
Well, you know, that's the... You know what? His note said, we are their cattle.
Yeah.
We are their cattle. So basically, they can do anything they want to us.
Right.
But the funny thing is, he commits suicide down in Florida, right? And Florida law requires an autopsy. No autopsy's done.
Right.
And they said, like, what he did was I think he plugged up the exhaust with a wet rag and the tailpipe and stuff. And they questioned people who looked at it and said, that wouldn't have worked. And you know, the way he did it, he said that wouldn't have created enough to kill the guy, and there was no autopsy ever done. But in his mind, with all he knew about the ancient alien stuff and sites, this was enough for him to say, that's it. You know, we're their cattle, we don't have free will, they can do with us whatever they want. And he kills himself. Now the guy with the pipe, that's Allende. 10 years later, in 1969, Allende, who's from New Kensington, PA, right here, be surprised how many of these people originated out of Pennsylvania.
Well, you better believe it.
A lot of them.
Right.
I'm stunned at how many came out of PA. You know, even today, Linda Moulton Howe, Lynn Katai, There's a George Knapp.
Yep.
It's amazing how many of them came out of Pennsylvania originally.
State and Oregon.
Yeah, well, yeah. So in '69, Allende goes to APRO, which is a big group.
Right, yeah.
APRO is like NICAP.
Yeah.
And he gives them an affidavit notarized saying the Philadelphia experiment was real. Okay? Now, some of the notes out of the book say, all science breaks down when confronted with the origin of man's intellectual development. That's not evolution, you know? Humans die due to gravity's wear and tear. Rocket propulsion will never solve space travel. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
Gravity ages us,
Right.
where if you were in space, I don't think you'd age as quick. And rocket technology is never going to get us where we want to go. It's never going to get you out of the solar system with humans, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to work. You have to go faster than that. They have, and this is written now 50 years ago, you know, 60 years ago. They have been here from the dawn of civilization. Man's ego is at stake. I believe that, you know, because we wouldn't be the top predator then. They will not allow humans to blow this planet up when it is the only one in a great distance which offers supplies and a haven for space travelers. The moon is a recent acquisition of Earth. And people have said that. If you look at the Milky Way galaxy, right, if that's my hand, the Earth is like right here on the outer edge from the center of it. So if you needed to go from the middle to here, you could refuel, restock supplies, and then leave the Milky Way galaxy, because that's where we're located. So there's a lot true about what this guy says, you know. And we know that the moon is nearly twice the age of the Earth.
Right.
So it came from somewhere else.
But was it man-made or was it really?
Who knows? They got stationed there one way or another. I find that whole story to be incredible also, you know. There are two distinct species that have come here, and they live in the ocean and in space. They can go in space. Well, think about it. If you can fly in space, you can go under the water.
Yeah.
You know, because you're airtight and you have some sort of technology that parts the electrons and parts the oceans and stuff, you know, or space. And you don't get hit with debris out in space, meteors, right? They're small in stature with 4 fingers. There's good ones, there are evil ones. The open seas are a natural home for them and provide an easy catching place of men and fish. Okay, so because the men are out there on these boats, right? Deep space is not for every man. Sailors can make the long voyage, so they are kidnapped. Think about that. If you're on a ship for months back then, you know, you're used to this confinement and loneliness, so their thinking is we're going to take sailors who are used to the confinement and the loneliness. They're the ones we're going to kidnap for this long trip in space. It's kind of interesting to think of that, you know. A diseased person once taken may not be desirable and is dropped off. You know, remember the Species movie in 1995 with Natasha Henstridge, Species? She was that alien. And she goes, and there's the guy, and she goes back to his apartment, but there's bottles of insulin, and she senses there's a disease. She left. Because he had an abnormality, you know? That was cool. And that's what he's talking about. If you weren't a perfect genetic specimen, they didn't want you. And you know, a lot of times, like, fish fall from the sky and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, people have said they want to take shark, so they catch other stuff in the net. So in the ship, they sort through, they throw the rest out, and boom, that's what lands. Because how do these things just fall from the sky? You know, really, it's not tornadoes, you know?
Oh, that's what they say.
Yeah, but I don't believe that, you know? So, humans love to impose their will and make war. We learned not to war. They went home after a war involving small asteroids as weapons, and the remnants are under the sea. So what they were doing, and I think you see this in the Mahabharata in India, where they talk about a war that took place in the sky. So, but what he's saying is they would take meteors and small rocks and asteroids, and that's what they would redirect. Because you think about it, if you're based on Earth and they can shoot a half-mile asteroid, you take out the size of Texas.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so there was some sort of a war that took place, you know, with either smaller meteors or asteroids. I mean, the whole thing, if nothing else, is extremely creative. And Jessup, it was too much for him to handle. When he got this additional information from Allende, he committed suicide, you know? So that's the Philadelphia experiment, right? But what comes from it is the Montauk Project in 1970, you know, 27 years later. They were doing experiments. They had this chair, and they would put you in, hook you up and everything. It was called the Montauk chair, and from your thoughts, you could create things. If you, certain people had the ability. So you could sit and think, and this bottle of alcohol, if this is what you want to do, or it's white label, boom, there it is, what you're drinking. So,
Matter of fact, I'm gonna have a drink.
time for a drink. You know, Fred, I knocked my coffee thing over. Look at that. I spilled the coffee.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. So, but they had this chair that they said you could create through the chair. One of the things that comes out from this, a beast, from the unconsciousness of one of the people in the chair. I guess if you're not a perfectly stable person, this guy is thinking, or he's got a real, something wrong with him, you know, so this beast comes from his subconscious. This is a real picture. This is a picture of what they took there at Montauk, of this dark shadow thing. It kind of looks a little bit like a Bigfoot, maybe.
Yeah,
you know,
it
kind of does, you know. But the only thing I don't like about this storyline is this is what happened in the movie Forbidden Planet. Remember, from the conscious, the thoughts, they created this creature that came and killed everything. But so are they copying it, or is it real? You know, I don't know. But that was my first thought when they started talking about bringing something through your consciousness. That they're talking. That was the Forbidden Planet movie. You know. They also said that they were able to open up time portals. They were able to control it. They could go ahead in time. They could go back in time. They were creating time travel is what they were doing. And you know, I read a book recently that said at some point, depending on who is in charge and stuff, they're going to go back to like the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're going to replace them with a different version. A version that nullifies the Catholic Church and the belief in God and Christianity. There's a whole different version in those jars. They'll put them there, they'll be found, and when they come out, it will destroy the Catholic Church. Think about what that would do. But that's the type of thing that can happen with time travel. You know, unless you can't go back in time. I don't know, maybe you can only go forward. I have no idea, you know.
If you go back in time, I think you can. I don't know how you can change everything, you know.
Well, I see what I think, like that show that used to be on years ago called Sliders on the Sci-Fi Channel. You create another reality. There could be hundreds of versions of Fred Saluga.
My God.
In this one, you're the president. It's not President Trump, it's President Saluga. In this one, you're in prison. You know, well, maybe that's the same. But you know, but you could create all. But I think if you went back in time, our version now doesn't change. I think it just splits into another version of us. If you go back and change something, I don't know. I mean, there is no way of knowing what happens, you know. But the whole concept of time travel really came from H.G. Wells in his 1894 book, The Time Machine, which was one of the greatest movies. You know, this was a good movie from the 60s, 1960s, was The Time Machine. Rod Taylor, he passed away last year. Rod Taylor was the actor. But what they said took place from 1970 to 83, where thousands of males between 10 and 16 were taken. They were taken to the future as slaves or soldiers. And he says in his book that it was very similar to the movie Total Recall. So the Schwarzenegger movie with Mars and the travel and the time travel was very similar to what they were doing there. So you could see how this Philadelphia experiment, Montauk Project, you know, it gives you all these branches come off of it, like Total Recall. Now, like I said, when I moved to Long Island in 1970, I was 13. So 10 to 16 years old, but I never had any
No.
of these type of experiences or anything like that. It's funny, one time I had a paper route, and I had a paper route until 11th grade. I would just, I loved doing my paper route. And it was like $25 a week I'd make, and it'd take me a half hour. It was nothing. One summer, my two friends and I biked to Montauk Point. We didn't know about Camp Hero.
Yeah.
We got there, we stayed one night, we went back. This was about an 80-mile trip each direction on bike. About 2/3 of the way back, I look around, my friends are laying on the side of the road, they couldn't make it. I had a paper route, so I was able to do it,
Right.
The father came, picked us all up, took us back, But I remember we were walking around, our arms, our legs was like so sore from doing it. But we went out to Montauk Point by bike, and I think that was 1973, I was 16. So what he talks about is the nature of time. And what he says is that we're pawns, cattle, right? Like on a chessboard. The example he gives is that the Greek and Roman gods, like with Troy, if you remember, how the gods would say, we're going to do this, when they just move a chess piece, and and then Achilles is fighting Hermes or something,
Right. Yeah, I think that goes on.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like the Matrix, like somebody puts a program in and things change, or my belief is we have free will. These things are done to see what choice you make. But some things are actually done and it changes. You can't do anything about it. That's going to happen,
Right.
But it's to teach you lessons, I don't know. But that's my view, is that it's all about free will and lessons to be learned in this lifetime, So that takes me to now this whole thing going on with Tom DeLonge, right? If you read what he says, right? And he created that To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, right? He does this broadcast. He says that, if you listen to it, and I watched it a couple of times, he says they have advanced high-speed craft that can move through water, like what they were talking about,
Right.
and through time. That you could be holding this glass, right? With this device you see here, they can take that glass from you, and where did it go? And here it is. On a small level, this is what Tom DeLonge says, they have some technology now that is high speed and moves through time. Again, like the Matrix, like how he was able to move while everybody else was in slow motion. That's what he's talking about, that he has, that they've acquired this technology. He says he got it from the government, from the Department of Defense is where he got it from, because they released those videos to him. So that's So here you got this Philadelphia experiment, Montauk project, time travel, total recall, Tom DeLonge's, there are a lot of branches come off of this. This guy committing suicide, Allende, Jessup. I mean, this case. I never realized. I mean, the Philadelphia experiment. I saw the movie. I never paid a whole lot of attention to it.
There's a lot to it, though.
Tesla technology. There was a ton, and that's not it. Wait till you see this. I don't have Netflix. My daughter does, right? So I watch Stranger Things. And I'm telling her, when they said MK Ultra in this, I started telling the kids all about what I knew with MK Ultra, right? But then I'm thinking, this is set in 1983. I watched season 2 over my daughter's house, right? And I was saying to myself, something here is clicking. There's more to Stranger Things than just what you're seeing. I go online, and I'm looking up now, the origin of Stranger Things is what I Googled. What was behind this show? There it is. Stranger Things was originally set to be filmed or based on Montauk Point, Long Island. It had to do with the Montauk experiment.
Right.
It was unbelievable. Because if you look at it, right now what they do, Stranger Things is set in Indiana in 1983. And then I think of, remember Erie, Indiana? Was a show that was on, so they did it in Indiana. Originally it was supposed to be on Montauk, Long Island. If you look at what they do, they got the base there. I don't remember what they call it, base Henry or something, whatever. There's a base, but that is the Montauk base. MK Ultra is involved, just like the Montauk Project. There's a group of kids, early teens. One boy disappears. a girl escapes from the base, and she's got all these powers, the MK Ultra and stuff they were working on. There are creatures, like the creature that came from the chair, the mind.
You have that government facility that works on animals right by there too.
Yeah, you're right.
What was it called?
I can't remember what that is. That's where they created Lyme disease, and it got out.
Right there, it's right next
Yeah,
to
Brookhaven Labs.
No,
I think it's Brookhaven Labs. Well, we'll look it up. We'll figure it out. But you're right. There's a facility very close to this who creates viruses and stuff with animals.
Right.
But Lyme's disease escaped from that lab, and that's how it's all over the Northeast now.
Right.
Came out of that lab near that.
Right.
And it might even be the same one. But, you know, they're talking about creatures, interdimensional travel, this girl, the kid. This is everything from Stranger Things. So Stranger Things came from the Montauk Project.
Right.
I knew there was something about this show that was just, I said, you know, there's something here, there's more to this show. And you can actually go online and look this stuff up. Well, people watching the show are seeing it from us, but there are some YouTube videos out there talking about this now. So, you know, that's our show on the Montauk Project, Philadelphia Experiment. Anything else that it brings to mind with you, Fred? I mean, to me, I guess...
I think the government has a facility like that still.
Oh, they do.
I mean, you know, like you're saying, the MK Ultra, that's still going on. You know, people don't believe it. The government can do things today that far beyond our comprehension. And like I say, I mean, you'd be sitting in your house and they're there.
Well,
and,
you know,
and one other thing, you know, you say about they're taking them to Mars, okay? Now, again, you look at Pilates, these young kids missing. And everybody that's missing, they're not old people, they're young.
Yeah.
Where are they going?
Yeah. Well, we'll get this 2 points before they go out of my head. 2 points. One, Bill Clinton apologized for MK Ultra. There's video out there. He
that's
says,
what's his name jumped out of the window.
Yeah, he says this took place, and that's out there. Bill Clinton apologized, so it did happen.
Right.
The other thing, I'm watching a X-Files, the originals. They're on TV now. I'm sitting there watching it, and I think the show was called Unit 731, which is the Japanese experiments on the Chinese.
Right.
In that episode, Scully is saying all these, remember they were all being taken and they had these deformed people and it was that box car and they were all full, there was a pit full of bodies. They were taking the kids. That's the Montauk Project.
Right.
That's where all the kids go, are these government experiments, or they take homeless people that are not going to be missed.
Or, I'm going to tell you another thing, David. Say, for example, you have a kid and they terminate your parental rights. You're blank now. You're nobody. You're just a body there. You have no name and no relative.
Yeah.
They can do whatever they want to do.
Well, you know, they said with Project Serpo that, like people, you know, when they had that exchange program with the ETs from Roswell, we sent 12 of ours for only one of theirs, which I find hard to believe, 12 for one. But what they said in that book, Project Serpo, was it's not that hard to find people in the military whose parents have passed away and they had no brothers or sisters.
Right.
Think about it. You're on your own at that point. That's who they target.
Yeah. Well, not only that, that's where you get your abductions. Why are they doing the abductions from the 40s? Okay? Is it really ET doing the abductions and taking us, or is it our military?
Yeah.
And we're pretending we're ET.
You know, you would be surprised when I watch like the X-Files, the old ones, a lot of the things we talk about, a lot of the theories now, 20 years ago, they were hitting on every one of those in that show. Very subtle. They talked about it very subtle. But the new show that's out right now is very conspiracy based.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they're going to hit it real hard. And they actually show aliens. They show the moon landing fake.
Baby Daddy is the
Yeah. Remember I put that on Facebook. You replied to that. Yeah.
Baby Daddy's the one.
Well, it turns out the smoking man is now the kid's father, not Mulder.
Mulder's father.
And the smoking man is Mulder's father. And Scully's the baby's father.
And the one Kershak or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
That's his dad too.
Yeah. So they're all related to the smoking man. Yeah. So unbelievable. But there was so much in those. So, you know, in my mind, some cases are just a one thing. Right. Well, I'll give you an example. I was going to say Kecksburg was a one-off, right? Yeah. But do you know what my partner on that, Owen Eichel, called me last week and he said, I just discovered something. I said, what? He goes, remember 1968, Night of the Living Dead, Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
He said what turned them into the zombies, it was based on the Kecksburg crash. It was either the radiation or it was a virus brought in from space from Kecksburg. The crash created the zombie thing in Pittsburgh. I never knew that, but there you go.
No.
So I don't know. So I hear the cuckoo clock. That's our show.
Okay.
And we'll see you next time. Finish your drink, Fred. We're done. That's
He's
our
been
show.
with us.
All right.